everybody. This is Screenplay for Derby Hooves News, and I'm here with Thom Zahler and Tony Fleecs from the My Little Pony Comics. Say hi, guys.
Hey. Hi.
Hey. All right, so I'm just going to ask you a couple questions about the comic stuff. So first off, how are you guys enjoying New York Comic Con?
I just started, but it's great so far.
Air conditioning seems to work, so that's good. It smells nice. It's not too crowded. I like it.
All right. Now, one of the questions I want to ask is, how did you guys break into the comic business?
I was dropped in my head a lot when I was a kid. Head trauma is very important to getting into this. Actually, my first work was lettering. I lettered for Innovation Comics, a couple other places, and built that up into... I started doing Love and Capes on my own. That's what brought me to IDW, and that's what brought me a pony.
How about you, Tony?
I started in independent comics. I did an autobiographical book, and I drew that, and it got picked up by a publisher, and I started going to conventions and meeting other publishers and other comic book artists and writers, and you meet enough people, and eventually somebody hires you to do stuff. So I started doing coloring and lettering and drawing short stories here and there, and then I got hired to draw My Little Pony.
Now, Tom, I know a lot of people listening to this have no idea what Love and Capes is, so tell us like a brief synopsis of what the storyline's about.
Love and Capes is a superhero romantic comedy about a superhero who says, I love my girlfriend and I'm going to tell her that, but if I tell her that, I got to tell her everything. So is there ever a good time to tell your girlfriend you have X-ray vision? What does she want for Christmas when she knows you can crush coal into diamonds? Things like that.
Oh, okay. So when it was announced IDW was publishing the My Little Pony comics, what was your first reaction?
They should have called. I thought it was great. I liked seeing them expanding in another market like that. My fiancé is a big fan. My fiancé is a big fan, so I knew they were going to be doing covers, and I went up to him and tried to get a cover, and that turned into getting to pitch one of the issues of the Micro.
How about you, Tony? What was your reaction to My Little Pony getting picked up by IDW?
I was excited. I was excited for IDW. I knew it was a big deal, and I knew it had a big fan base, and I've got a lot of friends at IDW, and I was psyched for those guys before I even knew I'd be involved with it. And then when I got the job, that was more psyched for me because it's a lot of work, and I like to work a lot, so it's good.
Now, I think it was in one interview where you were on a panel that one of the ideas for the My Little Pony Friendship is Magic comic was Mars Attacks My Little Pony.
Oh, yeah.
What was the idea about, what would have happened if that went to print?
Well, here's what happened. We were at a panel in Baltimore, and IDW announced that they were doing Mars Attacks, the IDW universe, but they weren't saying who. And I leaned forward and said, well, My Little Pony, obviously. And Dirk Wood, in his very Dirk Wood voice, said, I said, that's a pitch. And he's like, if you can get that to me by the end of the panel. So I did. And my idea was that the aliens would come to Equestria, but because of the spell, their weapons wouldn't work. And with violence not being an option for them, they would actually learn friendship. And then they would go back to the real universe and get killed by the Martians because they didn't understand that kind of stuff.
It'd be a very dark comedy.
Yeah, you could make it play both ways. If you took the explosion and put it in the first issue of the next Mars Attacks, you could remove that. I didn't think it was actually going to go, but I thought it was a really funny idea.
Yeah. All right. Now let's see if I can get to Tony. All right. Now, Tony, you're also the cover artist for a lot of the Larrys and Jetpacks stuff, and also this year's New York Comic Con exclusive. Now, how much input did you have in deciding upon the themes, like with the main comic being superheroes and the second and the micro comic being more children's book and mythology?
The fairy tale one was my idea. It was sort of like the third idea that came along. They wanted to do one thing, and then they were going to do something else, and then finally at the last minute they're like, we got to have this cover in the next 3 days, so what are we going to do? And we all sort of pitched ideas around, and I said, well, what if we just did fairy tales, and we did like a Philly version and a grown-up version, and then that was the thing. And that was fun at first, and then it became like super difficult to figure out what the fairy tale version of Pinkie Pie is going to be, or what the fairy tale version of the Cutie Mark Crusaders is going to be. And then the superheroes they were doing before I started that job. I'm actually not doing Larry's and Jetpack right now. Agnes Garabaska has taken over. I stopped doing them to do the annual, just because the annual's like twice the length of a regular issue. So I took off to do that, and they got Agnes in my place now. So.
Okay. Now, looking at both the comics, you guys have similar art style. I always wondered, why go for a show accurate style compared to traditional inking?
Well, I did do traditional inking. I used brush, and my theory was that I was trying to use the pony designs and models, but bring a classic technique to it. but I still use a Winsor Newton or a Raphael brush to ink everything with.
Okay. How about you?
I just like the way it looks. I always feel like when I get finished with a page and I put all the colored lines on, it all of a sudden looks right. And I like the way the show is designed and the colors that they use. It sort of makes the coloring easy. Tom had a colorist. He had Rhonda Pattison on his book.
Fantastic.
And I do my own colors, but I'm always impressed by, no matter what I draw on a page, if I put the right colors, like the show-specific colors, it always looks right. Like the show's just designed really well. But the next issue I'm working on, I'm gonna do regular line style, maybe some colored lines here and there, but the trick of the colored lines is that it takes forever. Like there's no trick to do it fast. So just for practical reasons, I'm stepping back a little bit. Heather Breckel, who colors the main series, colored my work on the annual, and seeing that stuff, I was like, oh, okay, I sort of get how this would work with my art, so I'm going to do it. As far as like show-accurate styles, as far as like being super on model, I've been pushing towards that for like since I started the job, and I'm starting to move to a more middle place now where I'm going to do something that's sort of like my version of My Little Ponies instead of trying so hard to do their version of My Little Ponies. I think it'll sort of have more life. Like I'm excited about it. The next issue that gets announced from me I'm going to do some stuff different. I think it's going to be exciting.
Now, what are some of your artistic influences, and does it reflect in any of your artwork?
I think so. Kurt Swan was a big influence on me. Ty Templeton, all the guys who did the Shazam books, Kurt Schaffenberger. And then later on, Darwin Cook, a lot of designy type stuff. I come from an advertising background as well, and I try to bring some of that to what I'm working on as well.
Okay. How about you?
I'm inspired by Disney cartoons, 1990s comic book artists, 1980s comic book artists, 1960s comic book artists. Like I love, my favorite comic book artists are like Bill Sienkiewicz and Arthur Adams and Brett Blevins. Anybody that drew the New Mutants. I love Rob Liefeld. I love everybody on New Mutants. But none of that looks like what I draw. It's just sort of stuff that all gets filtered through and comes out however it comes out. Although I'm sure some pony fans would say that I draw feet like Rob Liefeld.
Well, what's the creative process like? Do you have any methods to keep you relaxed when drawing or writing?
I don't tense up so much. The weird thing to me is that whenever I hit an artistic wall, I need to take a walk, and that solves it. But it takes me a good hour and a half to remember, oh, take a walk is just going to fix it. But it's that being out of my environment, not listening to headphones, just being alone in my head for a while. Also, the other goofy thing is that I have bath crayons in the shower because I get my best ideas there, so that way I can write them down and then write off my water bill.
The creative process?
Yeah.
I'm sort of the opposite. I work in a studio with two other guys all the time, and so I need to have like noise and excitement. We have the radio on, or we have talk radio or TV on, and the other guys work in comics too, so we're all sort of just in there working comics and trying to show somebody a page and say like, this is what I'm doing here, and they say you should change that, or that looks awesome, or that looks terrible. So it's a real collaborative process for me, which I kind of like because before working in a studio, working in comics is such a solitary lifestyle that you end up like if you've met comic book artists and you're like, that guy was kind of a jerk. It's because most of us just sit in a room by ourselves all the time and we just turn into jerks. Like the more comics somebody's drawn, the bigger of a jerk he's probably going to be, just because through no fault of his own he's just sat by himself for years and years. Like people say John Byrne is a jerk because John Byrne's drawn like 600 comic book issues.
Okay, now
Byrne is a popular 1980s and 70s comic book artist for the pony fans out there. He drew the Avengers.
Yep, and I know he also did some. He had a Superman run and a really good Wonder Woman run, I believe.
Absolutely.
Now onto the annual issue. Is it more of a challenge to draw the girls as bipedal creatures, or is it actually a relief to draw them as humans?
It's a little bit of both. I mean, it's sort of a relief in that I know how to draw people. Like, in every other job, people will say, like, I'll draw anything but horses, because horses is the hardest thing to draw. In ponies, I got to the point where I was working on the annual with the Equestria girls, and I was like, I just wish these girls were horses, because it's so much easier. They don't have clothes, they don't have hands, a lot of times they don't have noses, like it's much easier to draw the horses. So yeah, but like I'm used to drawing people. Before I started on My Little Pony, I drew generally just people all the time. So I sort of can fall into that pretty easy, and it was easy for me to find my style. Like, this is what my Rarity looks like, or this is what my Rainbow Dash looks like. And creating new characters was easier too, because I definitely have a frame of reference for what like teenage girls look like. That came out weird. You can buy a magazine and have a reference for what teenage girls look like.
Now, Tom, when writing the Twilight issue, I noticed that the one thing I really loved about it, how 100% accurate she was. Did you use an episode as a frame of reference? If so, which one?
I didn't use an episode so much as how much Twilight Sparkle likes books, and then you start trying to figure out what things would make interesting stories based on that. And the idea that she finds an author she loves who is never written again, that was the genesis for the story that eventually evolved to it was always a J.D. Salinger riff. It wasn't always quite as Finding Forrester. So that's also why I played with the idea of when Twilight Sparkle finds out, because I knew I couldn't hide from the audience that Summer Main was actually Jade Singer. So I wanted Twilight Sparkle to be smarter than everyone, and her to say, I figured out 5 pages ago. Where were you guys?
All right, now it was recently announced that My Little Pony sold 1 million copies. What's the reaction?
I just assumed that 98% of those were mine.
That's good. Means more work for me. The more comics they make, the more I get to draw. So I'm excited.
Are there any future projects you want to talk about that without spoiling?
I've got more pony pitches in, so hopefully I'll be doing some more stuff down the road.
I've got the annual coming out later this month. It's 48 pages. 8 pages are Andy and Katie. 40 pages are me and Ted Anderson.
All right. Final 3 questions. Favorite comic that's not your own or My Little Pony?
Darwin Cook's A New Frontier.
Powers.
Favorite superhero?
Firestorm.
Spider-Man.
And who is best pony?
Twilight Sparkle.
Applejack.
All right, I think that's it. Thanks guys so much for coming out.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thanks for having me.